Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still, and welcome to tonight's second half. For the first half, I just pretty much shared a kind of series of 4 upload interviews that I had done with Robert Sharp in his Life About Rascal. Right now, I have some very horrific experiences that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Ned Only. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? I live in the southeast corner of South Dakota, in a sleepy college town perched on the edge of the Missouri River Valley. The Missouri here is special, one of 2 sections of river designated as wild. The stretches of the river are non-navigable, no barge traffic, unimproved, non-dredged, and protected from major development, engineering, and change. The road trip in this encounter takes us through the forested region on the Nebraska side of the river, a combination of old-growth oak and other hardwoods, smaller shrub-like cedar trees, and, closer to the river, towering canopies of cottonwood trees. There are sections of the river here over 1 mile wide, and it is possible and wonderful to sit in the middle of the river in a lawn chair in 4 inches of flowing water, perched on one of the infinite number of constantly shifting sandbars. The area very closely resembles the state of things much as they were when Lewis and Clark went through. I've spent a fair amount of time on the river, both motorized and canoeing, and it is deeply spiritual and recharging place to me. Lands are prolific, managed and owned at both the state and federal level, and ever-growing. I am constantly on the hunt for a new chunk of land to go explore. Often this involves pulling off into a tiny fenced-off parking lot, throwing on the backpack, and heading out into the unimproved trails, not including wilderness, to discover what a given space has to offer. You never know what you are going to find or experience. For example, a good experience would be finding a 2-mile-long deer trail that winds through the prairie, through the wild cedar trees, through the overgrown cottonwoods, and opens up onto a 2-mile squared-sized sandbar of the most perfect, beautiful sand known to man. Dozens of tiny streams crisscrossing about, creating the perfect sort of Saturday afternoon hideout I drag my kids to in the summer, which they love. By the way, miles from civilization, miles from anyone at all. I'm always baffled and amazed to have these little chunks of paradise completely to ourselves, all because we are willing to throw a pack, explore, and get out there. Much of the time, I would head out to these locations on my own to get the lay of the land and see if there's anything worthwhile. It's always beautiful, peaceful, and recharging. But to be worthy of showing others, it must have something extra cool to show off. On these solo hikes, I would bring along my very willing partner in crime, my tiny Bichon Shih Tzu dog, Delia. She knows the routine, running ahead, sniffing the interesting things, letting me trudge by, then running to catch up and pass me by once again to find the next amazing to the dog thing to smell. Delia also acts as my external barometer. If I feel something odd, I could look at her, and if she's acting odd too, then I know something's truly up. While not part of the story, this has happened a few times. If the dog says it's time to go, it's time to go. And thus, occasionally, the inexplicable occurs: UFOs, odd lights, odd sounds, inexplicable fear, the Oz factor, animals behaving oddly, weird creatures, and just downright unexplainable things. The northern South Dakota side of the river is prairie, the product of an Ice Age glacier that scoured the land, then melted away about 12,000 years ago, the river valley being the product of this ice melt-off. The northern Nebraska side consists of ancient sandhills blown into place some 100,000 years ago. The land is hilly, curvy, alternating between sandy farmland, cattle grazing, cottonwood and cedar trees by the river, and some very old hardwood forests full of ancient oaks and such. There are large tracts of land, largely undisturbed by man, often only used for game production and some light hunting. Some areas are nearly impassable, and I am convinced that there are places where man has never set foot. Plenty of places to hide out of sight of man and beast. Onto the story, which takes place in the fall of 2020. As they are wont to do, my kids, late on a Saturday night, accosted me and declared, "Dad, river road trip." There are 4 of us, me, the dad figure, my 15-year-old son, and my 2 daughters, 13 and 10. This reoccurring fun consistent of all of us piling into the car, stopping at a gas station, gassing up, loading up with junk food and drink, cranking the tunes, and heading out into the darkness of the river valley, where I can show them yet another spooky late-night road they have not seen before. Our standard operating procedure is for me to get us on location, and once we would turn off the main highway, I surrender the driver's seat to my son so he can get some much-needed nighttime driving experience. We normally encounter exactly 0 cars over the course of a multi-hour drive. These are barely maintained sandy gravel back roads, miles and miles that snake along one side of the river or the other. There are also lots of dead ends where the road quality slowly drops off, eventually leading to paths only passable with 4-wheel drive, if that. This night we headed across the Newcastle Bridge into Nebraska, heading west, passing by the tiny village of Mescal, and hanging a right at Ober and heading north toward the river. These roads are extra spooky, winding through old-growth forests, minimal civilization with only a seldom yard light to mark our passage. There are several square miles of old-growth forest in this area, once again, with many locations not visited by man in a long time, if ever. I have driven this space several times and done quite a bit of hiking as well. There is no great river access per se, no place to park and hike out onto a sandbar, but the forest areas offer up its own worthwhile, unique experience. A side note, and I think it's important to know, I'm a spiritual guy. I believe in the paranormal because I've experienced it repeatedly, recently. It's well accepted and known part of my life. I'm open to it, in touch with it, and even actively invited into my life. By association, so are my kids. Be it, yet once again surrounded by the deafening silence of the Oz factor, seeing UFOs, ghost hunting, or some other aspect of non-stop, non-standard reality synchronicity, I live a life full of things I can't quite often explain, but nonetheless constantly seek it out. My oldest daughter, Josie, is especially in tune with things along with me. She sees and feels the things I do, even when no one else does. I mention this because the second we turned off the main highway and started heading into the darkness of the trees, Josie immediately got anxious and expressed as such. So much so, she went from having fun to "Dad, turn around and go home." Now I am a big think safety sort of father, and while I subject my kids to ridiculousness on a regular basis, I generally do so in a fashion where we all make it home in one piece, largely trauma-free. She was sitting in the back with Hazel, the youngest, and I stopped the car and give her, everyone really, a little pep talk. "Josie, here's the thing. I feel it too, okay? The energy. That thing that's making your spidey sense tingle. Yup, I'm totally validating it because it's real. And guess what? Here's the kicker. I feel that every time I come to this area, day or night, rain or shine, winter or summer. That's just what this place feels like. That's why we're here. And while I can't promise that nothing will happen, I can promise you this. I will do all I can to keep you safe. And you know me, I really do my damnedest to keep you safe and normally succeed. So, good to go? Gonna be okay? She agreed, but just barely. I had an ace in my pocket, though, and I knew she would be okay. The above exchange happened right by Obert, and we continued heading north toward the river. The car quieter, the tension higher, Josie on alert 10 times. Once we had snaked through most of the initial trees and hills and entered the flat river bottom, I played my hand. I stopped the car, looked at Brody and said, "Your turn," and hopped out. But instead of going shotgun, I went to the back door by Josie, opened the door, and barked, "You get shotgun." Now I love this setup. Everyone wins. The 10-year-old is beside herself because she gets to sit with Dad in the back seat. I'm still way cool to her, thank God. Brody gets to drive, Josie gets the coveted shotgun, and I get to keep my mouth shut, eat junk food, hang out with my youngest, and best of all, I get to sit and watch a rarely seen insider view of Josie and Brody being brother and sister getting along and living life large. Really, at this point, my job is to not screw it up. Watching them in the front seat is like a preview of who they already are. A view into part of their life I just don't get to see much. Best case scenario is they forget I'm in the car, which they largely do, other than my occasional random necessary backseat navigation of go left, go right, don't drive into that ditch. We stop occasionally in the progress, and I get everyone to pile out of the car and take in the sights. Be it a crystal clear star-filled night sky, some view of some inky black water on the river, a distant view of the city lights, or some other random point of interest. All in all, it takes several hours to travel these few scant miles. I navigated us around the river bottom, up out of the valley and back into the trees, until I have Brody take a right turn and park. In the middle of the road, no traffic, right? So we can take another breather. I need to go pee. And it was also time to change drivers in preparation for our journey back home. Out of the car, kicked Josie to the back seat, let Brody reclaim shotgun. I stood outside of the car for a bit, taking in the moment, listening to the laughter and music from within the car and purposely invoking a deep stoic moment of real appreciation. I live for these moments, reinforcing my deep connection with my kids, away from the rat race, getting us together, and getting us happy. Such great energy to experience. I was reveling in it, experiencing some great deep internal affirmation and satisfaction with life. I was feeling downright proud to have them there with me, sharing with them the life and experiences I love to have. Now, in this moment, it goes back to my spirituality. Realizing I was having a moment, I wanted to take advantage of the rush of positive energy I was feeling. I took a few deep breaths, relaxed my body, cleared my mind, and reached out to the world, heightening my senses and connecting with the environment around me, projecting my thoughts and emotions into the stillness. Here we are, we come in peace. Feeling nothing in return, after a few moments I open my eyes and look around. Judgment-free, unfiltered, and attempted to view the world for what it truly is. The night was clear, a new moon, no wind, above freezing, but cool and crisp. This location has some of the darkest skies in the nation. The Milky Way stretched horizon to horizon, and the whole sky glowed, so much so that the trees and other objects showed as dark black silhouettes against a slightly lighter night sky. This will be important soon. Satisfied and having had my moment, I got back into the car. My intention was to back the car up, turn to the south, and hit the intersection with the highway, then head home. As I got settled in the driver's seat, Brody said, "What's that?" He was peering out the windshield and down the road in front of us. This alerted Josie and I as well, and all three of us were drawn to look down the road, maybe all of 50 to 60 feet in front of the car. The road in front of us dipped down slightly, then rose again to gain a bit of elevation. What we were seeing was just up the incline in the road, so the headlights illuminated onto the road but didn't reach up the hill, creating a somewhat stark line between illuminated and not. And I'll drive this home. I've had some very odd experiences in the woods in this area over many outings over many years. To the north of this location is a huge section of forest with no open roads or paths. I've been in there, however, and more than once experienced deep, intense Oz factor. Maybe even some missing time, hiked into a space early in the day, ended up getting back to my car much later in the day than I should have. Odd noises, tree structures, and seeing things out of the corner of my eye. That deep sense of being watched, of not being alone, of a presence of some sort, of the hair on the back of your neck standing up. It goes beyond that as well. There's history here. Most of the houses, farms, and homesteads within and bordering the forested spots in this area are empty, long ago deserted. People can't or won't live here. This area has a reputation. It just feels that this land does not belong to the people. That's the direction this stuff was coming from, and it surprised me not at all that we were having the first of 3 odd experiences in this spot, apparently originating from the holler of trees. My brain couldn't make sense of what it was seeing. Crossing from the north to the south, right to left, low on the road, all of 2 feet or so tall, right on the edge of the headlights were brown and tan blurs, slightly transparent, but with the occasional kind of body part, legs, a head, eyes maybe. It had the appearance of one continuous blur of fast-moving confusion, where no given detail ever solidified into something recognizable. It lasted 10 to 15 seconds, and all my brain could come up with was, that's dozens of fast-moving bodies, animals, blurs, something. WTH. And then, just like that, it was over, and the road was again clear. It was a strange, heady experience that completely consumed our attention for the duration. I did not see animals. I saw something my brain could not make sense of, and I was unable to place any concrete labels on. It was also not lost on me that just moments before I had been outside of the car, seemingly exposed to whatever we had just witnessed. After a few moments of stunned silence, Josie spoke first. "Dad, what were all those big rabbits doing crossing the road?" Brody immediately retorted, "Rabbits? Those weren't rabbits, they look like miniature deer." Me, silence. They both stared at me, silent as well. It wasn't scary or threatening, just very confusing. Hazel finally spoke up from the back seat, apparently oblivious to it all. "I didn't see it. What was it?" At that moment, the thought popped into my head, almost as if placed there. It was what I get for reaching out and connecting with this place. It really wasn't threatening, and I knew my reaction would help set the stage for their reactions. So I did what I normally do when faced with the inexplicable. I made a smart-ass comment. "Hazel, my dear, that was effed up. That's what that was." And then I laughed, a nice, long, deep belly laugh. What else is there to do? My potty mouth broke the spell, and everyone else laughed as well. I started backing up the car, which was in the right direction to go, current events considered. I turned south and headed toward the highway, my thoughts already thinking ahead to get home, which caused me to again get caught off guard. Event number 2. I stopped at the highway stop sign, looked left then right. Brody was looking to the right, which would be the southwest. I'm glad we were both looking. Out on the horizon, we both saw something that lasted just the briefest amount of time. A second at most. A large, bright, whitish object appeared in the sky, then immediately disappeared. Brody and I both instantly exclaimed at the same time, "What was that?" The UAP, for lack of better terms these days, was to the southwest. and I immediately took in some details, years of practice. To the right of the occurrence was a farm, and to the left, some trees. I mentally noted them as points of reference for size and location. It seemed to occur at about the same distance out as the farm, which was about a mile out on top of a small hill. Whatever it had been, it was big, taking up much of the space between the farm and the trees, and about 2/3 as tall as wide. It filled that space in an instant, then just quickly went away. It didn't travel, it just poof. There, then gone, instantly lighting up, then quickly going dark. Where did it go? It had to still be around, right? I sprang into action. I saw that in front of us, across the highway, was a local high point. I punched it and drove the 150 yards or so to the top of a small hill, skidded to a stop, and to much protest of my passengers, turned off the headlights, left on the parking lights, left the car running, and hopped out to survey the night sky in all directions. Again, I noted the trees and the farmhouse. Whatever it was, wherever it went, I wanted to see it, to much protest from my passengers. My peeps were not happy at this point. They were freaked. I was freaked. This was getting weird. I systematically and quickly scanned the sky in all directions. I saw nothing. I listened. I heard nothing. Just a beautiful, crisp, glowing sky in all directions. Continued protest emanated from the car. And then it struck me as well. The growing sense of unease. The hair on the back of my neck started to rise and tingle. I got back into the car. I had looked around for all of 20 to 30 seconds max. My unease was still growing. It was time to go. I turned the car lights on and started down the road. To calm everyone else's nerves, including my own, I spoke aloud my intentions. I'm not stopping anymore. We'll take 2 left turns. We'll be back on the highway. We'll take a right, and we'll head home. Much gladness was showered upon this declaration, and I crept up to the next intersection, maybe at most hitting 30, then slowed down to turn. As I entered the intersection and started, Rosie meekly said from the back seat, "Dad, go." The tone in her voice conveyed all the info I needed, and I took off, now traveling much faster on what was proving to be a pretty crappy gravel road. About a mile down at the intersection, I hauled ass around the corner, pointing us toward the highway. I completely ignored the stop sign and executed a hard right turn onto the pavement and did not waste any time getting up to the legal highway speed. The car was quiet. I said to Brody, "Don't say anything about what you saw. We'll both draw it and see if we agree." Then I addressed Josie. There had been fear in her voice, and I needed to know why. She had been silent since she said go. "What happened, sweetheart?" "I don't know. I saw something. It was to the right in the corner of the field. Didn't you see it?" "No." "I thought it was a building, like an outhouse, but it started moving. It was brown and huge and fuzzy. When it started moving, I could see its arms and legs, and it was coming towards us. I could see the outline when the car lights turned away. I could see between its legs. It was huge. WTF, over." "Okay, Josie, same for you. Save it until we get home, then you can draw it and we'll talk about it." I asked Brody to crank on some happy music and wasted no time getting home. Our sense of uneasiness finally faded when we crossed over the bridge via the Newcastle Bridge back into sane, more familiar South Dakota territory. When I saw her drawing, I asked her, "Wow, so it looked like a Bigfoot?" Her response was, "No, that's not what a Bigfoot looks like." I realized that she has no idea what a Bigfoot looks like. Her drawing is sincere, and what she saw scared her. It was tall, probably 10 feet tall, fuzzy or hairy, with a massive broad body, very long arms, no neck, a huge blunt head, and it was moving fast and moving towards us. Fortunately, she wasn't traumatized, and I haven't heard much about it since then. I was sincerely concerned it was going to give her some sort of PTSD, but she took it all in stride. We agreed that everything was bright white, lasted briefly, then went out. To add oddity to oddity, not only did all these three things happen in rapid succession, they all seemed to be focused on the same general location. The animals crossing the road would have been heading in rapid fashion in the direction of what Brody and I saw in the sky. Josie's creature came from the same direction as whatever we saw. In a stroke of synchronicity, as is prone to happen in my life, I came upon an article a few days later about a Russian UFO incident known as the jellyfish UFO. That included a photo of said supposed UFO. I about fell over, for the photo was very nearly exactly what I saw in the sky. I didn't see the cloudy area underneath like in the picture, but the structure and shape of the top part is spot on. Believe it or not, my kids still request to go on late-night road trips with me, although we have not gone to that location again. This last weekend, I discovered 3 new spots to show them, and I can't wait to drive deep into the Nebraskan hills, surrounded by old-growth oak trees, and feel the energy of the location bearing down upon us. Who knows what we might see? I know I'll sure take a moment outside of the car to reflect, clear my thoughts and emotions, lower my guard, meditate, reach out with my mind's eye, and let them know that we indeed once again come in peace. Today's second encounter. A few months back, I was staying the night at one of my friend's houses. He lives on the far edge of the town in Utah. He still had neighbors around, but there was a lot of forest around, and it was next to a canyon. I don't know if the scenery helps the story, but I'll try to list every detail in my encounter. I was staying the night, and my girlfriend also came over to hang out for a while. We hang out, and everything's fine and fun. Great. 1 a.m. rolls around, and I have to work at 6 in another town about 30 minutes away. So I said, hey, maybe you should leave so I can get some sleep before work. And at this time, my friend went to sleep, and it was just me and her. As we are walking to the car, I start feeling uneasy, like I could hear something. We get to the driver's side of her car, and I give her a hug goodbye. As I'm hugging my girlfriend, I look behind her, and I am struck with shock and fear as I see a creature maybe 8 to 9 feet tall. It was standing next to a cherry tree on the side of my friend's driveway. It was bipedal and skinny. The moon was out, so I could see the creature clearly, but not so much color details. The legs were bent backward like a deer's legs, or like the back of a moose's legs. It slouched a lot, and I still couldn't see its face as it was in the leaves of the cherry tree, which has to be 11 to 12 feet tall. I remember not being able to talk much except goodbye to my girlfriend. I don't know why, but I couldn't tell her to look behind her. Before I let her go, though, I saw the creature move. It took off running toward the tree line. What absolutely baffled my mind was the speed of the creature. It looked impossible, as if it blurry when it started running. I remember it looked right at me, though the leaves, even though I couldn't see its face. What was the worst thing about this experience was the emotions attached to seeing what I saw. I felt like my confidence and emotions were attacked. I have never felt the feeling of fear like this before, and I have been charged by full-grown brown bears. After my girlfriend got in her car, I stood in that very spot from when I hugged her until she left the driveway. I don't know if it was more out of fear or making sure she left safely. I don't know what to do, so I slowly walked over to my car and got it. I called my friend multiple times, and he was asleep and he didn't answer. I looked out my window after several minutes and looked to the left and saw my friend's cat, Avery. And I tried to think logically. If my friend's cat, which probably has better senses than me, is out here, then I'm probably seeing things and it's safe. So I got out and stood next to Avery. Next thing I know, it sounds like there's a Clydesdale horse running through deep growth of the forest. Avery started running for the door, and I sprinted faster than Avery and got inside. For the next 3 hours, I sobbed and cried like I did when my dog died when I was 12. The fear I felt is indescribably powerful. I also remember it had long arms, and when it ran, it used all limbs. Today's final encounter. My name is Steve. I'm 58 years old, and on a quiet April morning in 1989, I learned that seeing is believing. I worked for a large corporation in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. At that time, I lived in Racine, making the 30-mile round trip to and from work every day, and never seeing anything out of the ordinary, or so I thought. I traveled Highway 38 northbound past Caddy Lane. I made my way over Root River Bridge, just past the Milwaukee Company Oak Creek road sign. I turned to the left and noticed a large group of deer gathered in the second field located to the west. I slowed down to look and noticed one of the deer had unusually large neck, the size of a tree trunk, and it was acting differently. Not calm and reserved like the other deer. It was dark brown in color and much larger, faster, and more powerful, with muscular shoulders and a huge front chest. It began running back and forth wildly on all fours. It then stopped, looked up at me, and sprinted toward my car. At this time, I pulled halfway onto the gravel shoulder to my right, rolled down my driver's side window, and watched in disbelief as its nose and facial features began to change shape. With an angry face, it leapt forward, again about 20 to 30 yards this time, again on all four legs, then turned and ran back to the other deer. It just stood there staring at me. Then it bent forward, where its front legs became arms. With huge hands, he clawed at my face as if to stop its transformation from taking place inside of him. I sat silently asking myself, how can you be so angry? How can you make these expressions with your nose? You're a deer. And with that thought, its whole body began to shake violently, and its head became a head of a wolf, with its ears pointing back at an angled position. It then stood up on its hind legs and began walking toward the deer, who were still milling about in the field but didn't run away. It then stood sideways, arms stretched forward with its palms facing up. With a height of at least 7 feet, maybe weighing 370 pounds, it began moving its head back and forth at the same time, up and down. I closed my driver's side window of the car and looked straight ahead to the road in front of me, too afraid to see what would happen next. I drove off slowly, straight to work, not telling anyone about what I had seen. And there you have it, folks. Tonight's second half. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is treated with the respect we all deserve, and that is because of you, so thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives sometime. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.